The door finally gave way, with a sound like a tree splitting in a storm, the hinges screaming as the massive plank tore free and crashed inward, skidding across the dirt floor until it struck the hearth and snapped in two. And for one frozen heartbeat, Eli Carter could only stare at the towering silhouette filling his doorway, a figure so broad it blocked the moonlight entirely, shoulders like carved stone, hair falling in a black curtain around a face marked by old scars and newer fury, an Apache warrior built like the mountains themselves. And when the man stepped inside the cabin, the walls seemed to shrink, the rafters groaning as if they recognized a force that did not belong to small, fragile things like wood and hope. Eli's breath caught in his throat, not because he had never seen an Apache before. He had traded with them once, shared water another time, but because never had one entered his home like this, uninvited, unstoppable, carrying with him the weight of generations wronged and a present moment that felt like judgment finally arriving. The warrior's dark eyes swept the room, lingering on the patched table, the hanging herbs, the cracked photograph of Eli's parents nailed beside the window. And when those eyes locked onto Eli, it felt as if every secret fear he'd buried since childhood had been dragged into the open and measured. "You said you would not cross the creek," the warrior said, his voice low and deep, each word heavy as a drumbeat. And Eli swallowed hard because he knew exactly what the man meant. Knew that promises made in desperation still counted as promises, even when the land itself seemed to conspire against keeping them. "I didn't," Eli said, forcing the words out even as his legs trembled. His hands raised not in surrender, but in honesty, palms open, empty. The fence broke. The storm. He gestured helplessly toward the shattered door, toward the night beyond, where thunder still rolled like distant cannon fire. The cattle wandered. I went after them, that's all. The Apache's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath scarred skin. And he took another step forward, the floorboards creaking under his weight, until he stood so close. Eli could smell rain and smoke and the faint metallic tang of old blood on him. And in that moment, Eli understood something that no story ever taught him, that fear was not loud or frantic. It was quiet and cold and sharp, like the edge of a blade pressed against the soul. "You always have reasons," the warrior said, his gaze flicking to the crude map Eli had drawn on the wall. Lines marking grazing land, water sources, boundaries that existed only because men insisted they did. Reasons are how homes are. Destroyed. Eli's heart pounded as he followed the man's eyes, realizing too late how that map must look, how it must feel to see your world reduced to chalk lines and ownership marks. And guilt flared hot in his chest because he had never meant to steal, never meant to push, only to survive, in a land that demanded more than it gave. "I was born here," Eli said softly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "My father was born here. This cabin, this is all I have." The Apache's eyes hardened at that, and for a terrifying second Eli thought the man might strike him, might tear the cabin apart log by log just to prove a point. But instead, the warrior's gaze drifted to the hearth where a pot still simmered, steam curling upward like a prayer, and something unreadable flickered across his face. "This land was born long before you," the warrior replied, his voice quieter now, more dangerous for it. "And it remembers." He reached out and grabbed the edge of the table, lifting it with one hand as if it weighed nothing, then setting it back down with deliberate care. A demonstration that sent a clear message, without spilling a single drop from the pot. Eli felt his knees weaken, yet some stubborn part of him refused to collapse, refused to beg, because this was his home, and if it was to be taken, it would be taken. From a man standing, not crawling. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the cabin in stark white. And in that flash, Eli saw the scars more clearly. Knife wounds, bullet marks, the map of a life spent in conflict, and he realized the Apache before him was not just angry, he was tired, carrying the burden of protecting something sacred in a world that kept testing its limits. "I will fix the fence," Eli said, his voice shaking but resolute. "I will move it back. I swear it." The warrior studied him for a long moment, the storm roaring around them, and then he reached into a leather pouch at his waist and pulled out a small carved token worn smooth by time, pressing it into Eli's chest with 2 fingers. "Words break like wood," he said. "This does not. When the sun rises, my people will come to see if your promise stands." With that, he turned and walked back toward the ruined doorway, stepping over the splintered wood as if it were nothing more than fallen leaves. And before disappearing into the rain, he paused, looking back once. "If it does not," he said quietly, "your home will fall easier than that door." The night swallowed him whole, leaving Eli alone with the storm, the broken door, and the weight of a dawn that suddenly felt like a trial he might not survive. And as he sank onto a chair, clutching the token in his trembling hand, he understood that this was only the beginning, that whatever came next would test not just his land or his strength, but the kind of man he chose to be when the world demanded more than he thought he had to give. And if you want to know what happened when the sun finally rose and the promise was put to the ultimate test, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next chapter will change everything you think you know about courage, consequence, and the true meaning of home. Dawn came slow and heavy, the kind of dawn that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. And Eli Carter had not slept even a single minute, sitting on the edge of his bed with the broken door replaced by a rough plank, nailed in haste, the carved Apache token resting in his palm like a weight that pressed deeper with every passing second. And when the first pale light spilled over the hills, it revealed the damage of the storm and the deeper damage of fear etched into the land itself. The fence torn wide open, posts snapped and wire twisted like dead snakes. Cattle huddled near the creek where they should never have been. And Eli moved with frantic purpose, hammering, pulling, lifting, his hands bleeding, his muscles screaming, because every strike of the hammer felt like a plea to the sky that effort might still mean something. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist. And that was when he heard it, not the sound of hooves or wagons, but the low rhythmic beat of footsteps, many of them steady and united, coming from the tree line. And Eli's heart sank as he turned to see them emerge one by one, Apache warriors. Not 3 or 4, but dozens, then more, their presence filling the open land like a living wall, until nearly 300 stood at the edge of his ranch, silent, watchful, powerful. And at their front stood the massive warrior from the night before, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on the fence and the cattle, and finally on Eli himself. Eli wiped sweat and blood from his brow and stepped forward, holding the token out with both hands, his voice hoarse but clear as he spoke. "I kept my word," he said, and the words felt small against the size of the moment. Yet he meant them with everything he had left. The warrior dismounted and walked the line of the repaired fence, running his hand along the wire, testing the posts, his warriors watching without a sound. And when he returned, the silence stretched so tight it felt like it might snap, until finally the Apache leader nodded once, slow and deliberate. "You chose effort over excuses," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "That is rare." Murmurs rippled through the warriors, not anger, not approval, but recognition, and Eli felt his knees nearly give out as the weight in his chest loosened for the first time since the door had fallen. But the test was not yet over, because the leader turned his gaze to the land itself, to the creek, to the hills beyond, and spoke again. "This place is not owned," he said. "It is shared or it is cursed." He gestured, and several warriors stepped forward, helping guide Eli's cattle back, showing him paths that avoided sacred ground, teaching him with actions rather than threats. And in that moment, Eli understood that the door had not been broken to destroy him, but to awaken him, to force him to see beyond lines on a map and understand the living history beneath his feet. When the sun stood high, the Apache warriors turned back toward the trees, their leader pausing only long enough to return the token to Eli's hand. "Now you—" "No," he said. "Do not forget. and then they were gone, leaving behind a ranch still standing, a man forever changed, and a future balanced on respect instead of fear. Eli stood alone in the quiet, the wind moving through the grass like a voice whispering approval. And he knew this story would not end with him, that it would be told and retold as a reminder that strength is not proven by breaking doors, but by what you build after they fall. And if this story moved you, if you want more powerful tales of courage, honor, and unforgettable moments like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might just change the way you see the world.